There are 3 small things you can say to someone you're interested in that will shift the energy of a date faster than almost anything else you do. And they aren't pickup lines. They aren't rehearsed compliments. And they aren't anything scripted or manipulative. They're just 3 honest, human sentences that most people have never thought to say out loud. And almost everyone, deep down, is quietly hopping to hear something like them. Because when one of these lines gets dropped into a conversation at the right moment, something in the other person's whole posture changes. They go from cautiously sizing you up to actually leaning in, from being politely agreeable to being genuinely curious, from thinking, "We'll see how this goes," to thinking, "Wait, who is this person? And why do I suddenly want to know more?" And before getting into all 3, it's worth telling a quick story about a date that was heading toward disaster and got completely turned around by exactly this kind of small shift. Because once you see how much weight a few careful words can carry, you stop underestimating them, and you start using them on purpose instead of by accident. So here's the setup. In most cases, the truth about dating and attraction is that how you say something matters far more than what you say. Tone, presence, timing, all of that usually outweighs the actual words. But there are a handful of moments where the specific words themselves carry enormous weight, where the right sentence at the right second can take someone from polite to genuinely electric, and where the wrong sentence, or no sentence at all, can take someone from interested to quietly checked out in under 5 seconds, and most people have simply never been taught to tell the difference, which is exactly what this is meant to fix. But first, back to the story, because it pulls everything together. Picture a woman, recently out of a long relationship, finally feeling ready to put herself back out there after a long stretch of not dating at all. And a mutual friend sets her up with someone she'd actually already met once before, at a casual group gathering, where the 2 of them had genuinely hit it off. Easy laughter, real chemistry, the kind of spark that makes you look forward to seeing someone again. So she went into this actual one-on-one date feeling genuinely excited. Hopeful even, they picked a nice restaurant. The setting was right. The mood should have been right. And then from the moment they sat down, he just talked about his job, about his weekend, his opinions on the menu, his thoughts on the wine list, on, one monologue rolling into the next, and not once, not a single time in the first 20 minutes, did he ask her a question about herself. And 20 minutes in, she excused herself to the bathroom and called a close friend from the stall. Frustrated, venting that he wouldn't stop talking about himself, and she was already mentally halfway out the door. And here's the advice she got back, which is worth repeating because it's true far more often than people assume. He's probably not self-absorbed. He's probably nervous. He clearly likes her enough to be nervous. And he simply doesn't have anything else to fill the silence with except more of himself. Because so much of the advice floating around out there tells men that silence on a date is fatal, that any lull has to be filled immediately. So instead of sitting in that discomfort, they just keep generating words. And the fix in that moment isn't to call him out or to try to out-talk him back. It's something much smaller, so she was told to go back to the table, reach over, rest her hand gently on his arm for a moment, hold his eyes, and just smile to let him physically feel that she was there, that she was present, that she wasn't judging him, and to let his nervous system relax enough to stop performing. So she did exactly that. She walked back in, touched his arm, held his gaze, smiled warmly, and within minutes something in him visibly shifted. He slowed down. He started asking her questions, actually listening to the answers, and the version of him she'd met at that first gathering, warm, curious, easy to talk to, came back out, and 3 hours later she was texting from the car about how much the whole night had turned around, how they'd ended up talking for ages, genuinely connecting, and that relationship went on to last a few months afterward, all because of one small physical gesture that reset the whole tone of the evening. And the point of that story isn't that someone always needs a friend on speed dial to talk them off the ledge mid-date, because most people won't get that kind of real-time coaching. The point is that these tiny resets, these small verbal and physical moves, are learnable, repeatable tools that anyone can use on themselves, in the moment, without needing anyone else in the loop. And that's exactly what these 3 phrases are for, 3 small sentences that, the instant they're said, change the entire energy at the table. So the first one is something like, "Wait, I've been talking a lot, tell me about you." And this might be the single most effective sentence a person can say on a date, because of what it silently communicates in just a few words. When someone stops themselves mid-flow and redirects the spotlight like that, the other person registers a few things almost instantly, without even consciously thinking it through. First, self-awareness, the ability to notice your own behavior in real time and adjust it, which is genuinely rare. Most people, when they're nervous or excited, just keep barreling forward without ever checking in on how they're coming across. So catching yourself and course-correcting signals real emotional maturity. Second, it signals a kind of ease or abundance, the sense that you don't need to keep performing, keep proving you're interesting, keep filling every silence with your own achievements or opinions. Because someone who is deeply insecure tends to do the opposite, they drown any potential silence in more and more words about themselves, because the silence itself feels dangerous. So choosing to stop and hand the floor to someone else signals real confidence. And third, and maybe most importantly, it signals genuine curiosity, actual interest in who this other person is, not just interest in dating them or being with them physically, but real interest in knowing them. Understanding them, hearing their story, and people, especially people who have been on the receiving end of a lot of surface-level or self-centered dates, are quietly starving for someone who seems curious about them rather than someone who's simply performing at them. And here's the interesting part. This sentence works even when it isn't strictly true. Even if the conversation up to that point has actually been pretty balanced, back and forth, evenly shared, saying it 20 minutes in still lands. The other person might laugh and say something like, "You really haven't been talking that much." But by that point, the three signals are already planted: self-awareness, abundance, curiosity, and that combination is exactly what makes someone lean forward instead of settling back into polite autopilot. So that's the first one, moving to the second. A question like, "What's something that's been making you feel really alive lately?" And this is meant to replace the standard interview-style questions that dominate most first dates. The "where did you grow up? What do you do for work? Do you have any siblings?" questions, which aren't bad exactly, they're fine as icebreakers. But they don't create any spark. They just have someone reciting facts about their life like a resume. This question does something completely different. Because it bypasses the surface-level facts and goes straight to feeling, when someone actually pauses to think about it, really thinks about what's been making them feel alive lately, they have to mentally step back into that experience. The trip they took a few months ago, the new hobby they just picked up, the small moment last weekend that surprised them or moved them. They have to reconnect, even briefly, with the feeling of being fully present and alive, and they end up doing that reconnecting right there. Across the table, with someone watching them do it, and something shifts in their face as they answer. Their eyes brighten, their energy changes. They become, for a moment, the version of themselves that they actually like being, the version that feels most like them, and the person who invited that shift, who asked the question that pulled that feeling out of them, becomes quietly associated with that good feeling in the other person's mind. And the honest truth is you don't have to be the actual cause of that feeling of aliveness. You just have to be the one who invited them to access it in your presence, and there are a few variations that do the same job just as well. Questions like, "What's lighting you up right now?" Or, "When was the last time you felt completely like yourself?" Or, "What's the most alive you felt this year?" All of them accomplish the same core thing. They pull someone out of their head and into their body, out of reciting facts and into actually feeling something. And they position the person asking as someone who cares about the feeling behind the story, not just the story itself, which brings us to the third and final one, a simple, direct line. "I'm really enjoying you," or some close variation of it, and this one works as a kind of closer. It's short, it's a little vulnerable, it's completely direct, and almost nobody says it out loud. Most people, when they're genuinely enjoying a date, communicate that indirectly instead. They get a little more animated. They lean in a bit more. Maybe they find a reason to touch the other person's hand or arm. They hope the other person is picking up on all these subtle signals. But subtle signals are easy to miss, easy to second-guess, and easy to talk yourself out of believing, especially for people who have been burned before or who tend to overthink. And here's what's often happening quietly in someone's head throughout a date that's actually going well. Is this going well? Do they like me? Am I imagining this connection? Am I going to go home and tell my friends I thought there was chemistry and then feel embarrassed because it turns out there wasn't? That kind of low-grade uncertainty runs in the background the entire time. even while someone is smiling, laughing, and seeming totally at ease on the outside. And the moment someone says out loud, "I'm really enjoying you," or "I'm having a really good time with you," that whole background hum of uncertainty quiets down. The other person gets to relax and actually be present on the date, instead of quietly auditing whether the date is going well. And that shift, from managing anxiety to actually being present, is often the real difference between someone having a pleasant enough time and someone feeling a genuine spark with the person across from them. And there are a few variations that land just as well here too. Things like, "I really like talking to you," or "There's something about you I can't quite put my finger on yet," or even something as simple as "I have to say, I'm having a really good time with you." All of these do the same essential job. They name the connection out loud instead of leaving it unspoken. They take the other person out of their own head, and they give them permission to stop guessing and just enjoy the moment. And stepping back, what ties all three of these together is a simple idea worth sitting with. Most people go into dates trying to seem impressive, interesting, worth choosing, and that instinct, while understandable, often backfires, because it keeps both people performing for each other instead of actually connecting. And these three small moves work precisely because they interrupt that performance loop. The first one hands over the floor and signals real confidence and curiosity. The second one invites someone to reconnect with a genuine feeling instead of reciting facts. And the third one simply says the quiet part out loud instead of hoping it gets picked up on through subtext. And none of these require charm in the traditional sense. None of them require being the funniest or most impressive person at the table. They just require presence, timing, and a willingness to be a little more direct than most people are used to being, which, in a dating landscape full of guardedness and second-guessing, tends to stand out far more than people expect. And worth remembering, too, is that context and tone still matter enormously. The same sentence said with warmth and genuine curiosity lands completely differently than the same words said mechanically or as a rehearsed line. So the goal here was never to hand over a script to recite word for word. It was to explain the underlying psychology so that these moments can be recognized and used naturally, in a way that actually reflects real interest. Because that authenticity is what makes the words work in the first place. And beyond these three, there's a broader pattern worth noticing in general, which is that people tend to respond far more to being truly seen and heard than to being impressed. So any habit that shifts the focus from performing to genuinely paying attention, whether that's asking a thoughtful follow-up question, reflecting back something someone said in a way that shows it actually landed, or simply nomming a feeling out loud instead of leaving it unspoken, tends to build the kind of connection that these three specific phrases are just concrete examples of. And that's really the takeaway here, not memorizing exact wording, but understanding why these particular moves work, so they can be adapted naturally to whatever the actual moment calls for, whether that's a first date, a second date, or any conversation where genuine connection is the goal.